Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really trying to navigate the complex landscape of the Israel-Gaza war. It's now in its 22nd month. Our goal here is simple. Cut through all the noise, find the critical insights, maybe some surprising facts about the latest developments, the humanitarian side, and the diplomacy. Think of us as guides through the source material you gave us.
Right. And this deep dive, it really goes beyond just the military moves, the chessboard, as you put it.
Mhm.
Our sources, they really push us to look at the dire humanitarian situation, the incredible human cost, and also how this whole conflict is reshaping geopolitics across the region.
Mhm.
We're even seeing direct clashes between Israel and Iran.
Mhm.
It's incredibly complex, still evolving.
Yeah, you mentioned the military chessboard, and that's where we see those immediate tragic costs, right? The sources, they paint a pretty clear picture. Military operations in Gaza, they're still incredibly intense, persistent, and the human toll is high. Just recently, 5 Israeli soldiers were killed up in northern Gaza in Beit Hanun. And on the Palestinian side, the numbers are just, well, staggering. Over 57,000 killed as of July 2025. That includes more than 17,000 children, 9,000 women. It's really hard to wrap your head around those figures, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And what the sources truly unpack about Israel's Operation Gideon's Chariots, which kicked off back in May, it seems to go beyond just, defeating Hamas. There's this highly controversial objective, maybe staggering is the word, to concentrate and move the population.
Yeah.
They call it voluntary migration. But this isn't just some minor detail. Human rights experts they're condemning this quite strongly, calling it potential war crimes, maybe even crimes against humanity. It highlights this huge legal and ethical debate.
That's a really stark picture of the strategy. But when you talk about concentrating and moving the population, what does that actually look like for the people caught in the middle? I mean, how are the sources showing the humanitarian crisis beyond just the direct casualties from fighting?
Well, it means massive displacement, for starters. Over 1.9 million people. That's like 90% of Gaza's population, pushed out of their homes, often again and again, into smaller and smaller overcrowded areas. And what's really unsettling, looking at the broader picture, are these proposals for so-called humanitarian cities in southern Gaza. These aren't just temporary shelters. The sources describe them as guarded camps, designed, it seems, to hold over 2 million Palestinians, with stated goals of demographic transformation. So it's not just about moving people temporarily. It really raises profound questions about the long-term plan, the future for these people.
Wow. And, you just detailed the displacement, but this crisis gets even darker when you look at aid distribution. Our sources show this really disturbing pattern. Since late May, hundreds of Palestinian civilians, the number 640 killed, over 4,400 injured, died just trying to get food at aid sites. There were even reports from Haaretz claiming Israeli soldiers had orders to fire on unarmed people seeking aid. International groups are calling these places death traps. They're condemning the, quote, weaponizing aid.
Right. And that brings us to the aid restrictions themselves, which are critical. Look, no fuel has been allowed into Gaza for over 4 months now. Since March 2nd, that threatens all essential services. Hospitals, water, everything. And UNRWA, the main UN agency for Palestinian refugees, they've been blocked from bringing in aid for just as long. It's the result, a healthcare system that's nearly collapsed. We're seeing surges in diseases like meningitis, acute watery diarrhea. It's dire.
So against this backdrop of just immense suffering, what are the sources telling us about diplomacy? Is there any movement? There's this new U.S.-backed 60-day ceasefire proposal. Former President Trump announced Israel agreed, and Hamas says it's ready to engage. So what's the reality there?
Well, here's the fundamental problem, the core contradiction, really. Israel is explicitly saying it's not committing to ending the war for good. They're vowing, quote, there will be no Hamas after the 60 days. But Hamas, their demand is for a definitive end to the war with guarantees. So you see the issue. It strongly suggests any ceasefire, if it happens, is probably just a temporary pause, not a real resolution.
So if their core demands are just completely opposed, like the sources indicate, does that mean the 60-day plan is kind of dead on arrival? Or are there any, hidden paths to something real suggested anywhere in the material?
The sources seem to suggest that, well, unless one side fundamentally changes its core demand, the proposal is more like a Band-Aid. A humanitarian window. It's an attempt maybe to ease the immediate suffering, but it doesn't actually solve those underlying strategic conflicts.
And the conflict's impact, it's not just contained within Gaza, is it? Sources highlight how it's directly sparking more aggression in the Red Sea. You have Houthi rebels attacking ships again, like the Magic Seas, the Eternity Sea in early July, and they're explicitly saying it's linked to Israel.
Exactly. And maybe the most worrying regional escalation we're seeing is these direct military confrontations between Israel and Iran. We saw Israeli attacks on Iranian nuclear sites back in June 2025. Plus, Israel is still hitting targets deep inside Lebanon, even though there's supposedly a ceasefire with Hezbollah. It points to a much wider, much more dangerous regional dynamic at play.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of it all? We've seen how the military stuff, the humanitarian crisis, the diplomatic efforts, they're all tangled together, and it's fueling instability across the region.
Yeah, and maybe this raises a provocative thought for you to consider, something to mull over. What are the long-term implications when an explicit goal of population control is actually on the table, and when humanitarian aid itself seems to become a tool within the conflict rather than just a neutral lifeline?
Precisely. Look, this deep dive into your sources, it's really just scratching the surface. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these incredibly complex and frankly very difficult issues.